Hello, and welcome to this YouTube video. I don't really know how to intro YouTube videos, so I'm just kind of winging it. So, with that in mind, here are 5 things I would personally like to see in a potential Dead Space 4. And before everyone keeps telling me that there is no Dead Space 4, yes, the chances of a Dead Space 4 are pretty much gone at this point, thanks to Visceral Games shutting down and the IP just in the ether. But either way, I wanted to make a fun little video, just expressing 5 things I would like to see if the Dead Space franchise were to ever return in any capacity, whether it be a reboot, which I would honestly prefer, or a straight up sequel to Dead Space 3. So, number 1 would be, as I slightly mentioned before, I would like to see a full reboot of the Dead Space franchise, ideally. I think the story's gone a bit off the rails, and I think that it's just gotten way too big for its own good. I think Dead Space worked so much better with a lower key story in a much more confined areas, and I think Dead Space 3 just tried to make the story larger than life with moon necromorphs that literally sprang out of the moon and could infect solar systems. It was just too much, and I honestly thought that the Dead Space story just got too big for its own good. It fell into the same traps that every horror movie franchise has, and a lot of video game franchises have. Looking at Resident Evil, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, you can name a dozen off the top of your head. And while I do think a reboot would be the best, honestly, I would just like to see a more low-key story. And if they were to continue it in the vein of the original series, I would like to see maybe following another character in the events of what was to come. Like we saw that Earth was being invaded by all the necromoons. And so while it's being invaded, maybe following someone just trying to make it through the city or just trying to overcome this threat in this area. Kind of, for an example, I would say Leon in Left 4 Dead, I almost said Left 4 Dead 2, God. Leon in Resident Evil 2, where he has no idea really what's going on. His only real goal is let's survive and kind of figure it along as we go. So maybe something like that on Earth while the necromorphs are attacking. Just somebody who's just trying to make their way out. Whole new thing. Keep the story very low key. Maybe kind of interact with it at the end. I think that after the gap since Dead Space 3, diving right back into this mega story and all that with Isaac and his little cast of characters would just be too much. I think we definitely need to scale it a little bit back for the comeback to actually work. So for my second point, it's actually quite simple. I think that Dead Space should go back to space and stay in space. I mean, some of the best horror movies in history were in space. Alien, Jason X. Do I even need to name a third one? But overall, it just creates much more tension. The idea that you're trapped and isolated and there's really nowhere to go. It's kind of like if you were trapped in the bottom of the ocean. And I think going to the planet just completely took away so much of that fear and just took away so much of the atmosphere that Dead Space 1 and 2 had so carefully crafted, and it just went back to the drawing board and it just didn't work. So Dead Space 4 should just go to space and just never leave. So my third point is going to be to take away all of the non-necromorph fights. I don't think Dead Space really needs to be the franchise where I'm going around shooting other dudes who also have engineering-like weapons, don't really know why, and just in big old gun battles. Again, that's not what the franchise is. Dead Space 3 just completely lost its own identity, and Dead Space 4 should just go back to strictly fighting the necromorphs. I don't know why they ever got away from it. I don't really think it needs to be said, but regardless, I think that is a solid point that Dead Space 4 will need to bring back, is just completely take away anything that doesn't fall in the necromorph category. Just get rid of it. Toss it out there. Necromorph and necromorphs only. Not Necro wafers, but necromorphs. It's simple. So my fourth point is something that I will commend Dead Space 3 for a little bit. One of the few things that I will actually, put in the praise column of the T chart. And that is trying to spice up the gameplay a little bit. Trying to reinvent the wheel. And while Dead Space tried to build a whole new wheel with crazy amounts of unnecessary things. I would like to see Dead Space 4, take the wheel that Dead Space 1 and 2 perfected and, just maybe smooth it out, clean it up a little bit. Add a little bit of spice of life to the gameplay that we already know and love. Don't go crazy, don't change it, but just add some more fun elements. I think something that Dead Space would really benefit from is something they could take from the Resident Evil franchise, because it's not like they haven't already taken a lot from them anyway, but would be a consistent, terrifying villain that periodically follows you throughout the game. And before people start arguing with me and telling me that they kind of have that with those enemies that you can't kill and you can just shoot off their legs and they crawl at you until the legs regrow, this is not the same. Those segments are very small and very limited, and just doesn't have that same oh my god presence. It's more of just a really big nuisance. I'm looking at things like Mr. T, Nemesis, the alien from Alien Isolation. These larger than life scary enemies where basically your main form of defense is to just run the fuck away. I think that Dead Space would really benefit from something like that, where periodically throughout the campaign there is something chasing you that you just, you try to hide, you try to run, maybe you shoot a little bit and it kind of leaves away. But I do think adding something like that would definitely spice up the gameplay and definitely add to the fear, which is something that Dead Space 4 as a whole would need to bring back. And honestly, if Resident Evil 6 it can be as bad as it was, and then Resident Evil 7 is a triumphant masterpiece, then I'm pretty sure Dead Space 4 could come back from Dead Space 3. So, for my fifth and final point, I would like to see Dead Space 4 take on a less linear level design. For something I'd be kind of looking at would be something kind of like Bioshock 1, where it's still a fairly linear game, but you still have the option to kind of like backtrack and move around through Rapture a little bit. And I think this would work really well for Dead Space, because most of the maps in Dead Space, and by maps I mean the setting for 1, 2, and 3, all felt really good, and it made you feel like there was a lot more to explore there. It made you feel like this really is a major city, but that you're just happen to be going down this one route. But it always felt much larger than it was. And I know the beginning of Dead Space 3 kind of experimented a little bit with a more open world kind of area before you get to the planet, and I thought it worked really well. It was one of the stronger parts of the game. And so I'd like to see Dead Space 4 kind of learn from that segment and apply it to like the entire game, with a setting kind of similar to Dead Space 2. I think that would be ideal, and it's something that'd be really strong. So those are my 5 dream things to see in a Dead Space 4. And I do think those will remain in my dreams, because I think the chances of us getting a Dead Space 4 are fairly dead at this point. But still, it's fun to kind of think and imagine what it would be like.